to guide us through our learning in the field of communication and facilitation. We have the honor to present Margaret Tusz-King, who is an adult educator in Sackville, New Brunswick, and she's a community mentor since 2014. She was the founding executive director and designer of the Open Sky Cooperative Program. Sorry. If you're not muted, if you could kindly do so that we don't have any background noise. Open Skies which works with handicapped people and helps them to affirm their skills. She's also coordinator of the Summer Institute for Accessible Employment at University of Mount Allison. She likes community work and communication, and she is looking forward to initiating the members of this assembly to effective communication and moderation or facilitation. So,
story about what pushed you to pursue this path into adult education, and I'm wondering, do you want to share that to start with the group? Sorry.
Sure, I would be happy to. And thank you so much for this invitation. I'm really pleased to be here. And I know how challenging and important community work is. So I know that every single person here is passionate about doing something about improving the quality and access to healthy foods in New Brunswick. So thank you so much for your participation in this as well. Yeah, I was telling Mina in one of our many conversations about my first experience in doing the kind of work that's like community food mentor work. And it was in the mid-90s, and I was running a food bank, and we had this wonderful program that came to us from Toronto, from the Department of Health, back when cities had departments of health. And I found this, I dug this out, Mina, today. It's the cookbook that was with the program that we did. And this was a program developed by dietitians, and it was about helping low-income people learn how to cook and manage money and things like that. And it was a great program. My friend Sandy and I did it, and we followed it just like a cookbook, doing everything on day 1 and day 2 and day 3 that they told us. And the whole thing fell absolutely flat. You know, there were so many problems with how we implemented it, and nobody learned, and it was dreadful. And that was when I thought, gosh, I've got to learn how to do this better, because if this is what the professionals are producing and trying to get us to do in communities and it doesn't work, we have to do something else. But I think the story that's related to that Mina wanted me to tell you was, I said, there's this really high level adult education term that I learned when I was doing this work. It is AFLO. It's AFLO. And it stands for, pardon the language, another fucking learning opportunity, which is a good way of reframing when things go absolutely badly. It's, how do I regroup? How do I figure out what went wrong and learn from it so the next time I don't make the same mistakes? And so I keep this as a beacon of how to make big mistakes. And I've learned a lot since then, but actually I saved the cookbook, because who among us doesn't like cookbooks, right? So I do have the cookbook, don't have the program anymore. But anyway, so I've been invited to talk to you about facilitation and communication. And the great irony, of course, is that here we are online in probably one of the worst ways we could ever participate in communication and facilitation. And I do apologize to the francophones in our midst. I will be speaking only in English. I tell people I speak French well enough to impress Anglophones, but Francophones know I am not very good. So I am relying on the kind interpreters to help convey my meaning to others, with my apologies. So I'm going to just share my screen if I can get permission. There we are. I'll get my presentation set up here. Whoops, there we go, up here. Where am I? That's where I ran through there. Communication and facilitation skills. That's me. Are we good with seeing the screen, Mina? Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So I'm going to start with presenting my agenda for the program today. I'll start out with a little bit of an introduction and icebreaker. Then We will review the learning goals that I've identified for today's session, and as well some group agreements for how we'll work together. Next, I'll do a presentation. I think it's going to be about 20 minutes long. Followed by that, we're going to invite you to go into small groups, into breakout groups for about 20 minutes. And there will be a website that you will click on, and your work for your small group will be there on that website for you. During that time, if you need to take a few minutes break, we are inviting you to take those few minutes then. The agreement with mine is, depending on how many small groups there are, it could be that we could give you a longer time if there's fewer groups. There was no knowledge of how many groups we would need, so we have hopefully plenty for people to choose from. So after the small group work, there's going to be reporting back from each of the groups into the presentation this morning and this afternoon. So there will be time for that. We'll do a little bit of a reflection at the end and then conclusions with Mina. So that is our plan for today. If you have any questions about that, you could put that into the chat, and Mina's going to monitor that for me, and she'll let me know if there is anything. If we were in person, I would look around the room and I would get nods from everybody as to whether this looks like an agenda that people would like. For introductions, it's really important when you're leading your groups that as early as possible, we invite everybody's voice into the circle. That's an important thing for people to feel comfortable, right? So a nice way is just having people introduce themselves and maybe say something interesting about themselves. So it helps me as a facilitator find out who is here. It also can help me get information. For example, I could say, okay, when you say your name, why don't you say one thing you're hoping to get out of today's program? And when people do that, when I'm the facilitator, I can pick up on that information. And if somebody says, well, I hope to learn how to, make cream puffs, I could say, well, that's an interesting goal, but we're not going to be doing it today. So we can temper people's expectations. But also, we can also say, when someone says what they want to do and we're going to do that, you can say, that's great. We're going to be talking about that in the second half of the workshop. I'm so glad you're here for this. So there's a way you can have a one-on-one exchange with people just in the introduction time. And when they've spoken to the whole group, it's kind of broken the ice. So it's going to be easier for them to join in and ask questions and participate later. So today, though, we don't have an ability to do that with such a large group. So instead, I'm going to be providing an icebreaker for you. And I don't know if you can see the quote on your screen. Education is an act of love and thus an act of courage. And if you're interested in learning more about being a transformational leader, I would suggest you look at the work of Paulo Freire. And he was a Brazilian educator who has done a lot of work and writing around power and education and democracy. So that's he's a wonderful role model that I've learned about through my adult education studies. But for the icebreaker, I wonder if each of you would think of an experience that you had when someone was doing a really great job of facilitating. And in the chat box, write down one quality of that person or of their facilitation that you found helpful. Let's see if we can get a wonderful list of fine qualities in the chat. What a lovely list. Engaging, passionate, brave, comfortable with silence, animated, humorous, provocative, knowledgeable, comfortable speaking, all of those things. They make such a difference for us, don't they? In even our attitude coming into a program, whether we feel comfortable, we feel passionate, things like that. So that's really important. And those attitudes are significant, especially when you're creating a new group, because you want to create a culture that builds the trust and relationships that you need in order to do very good community work together. So that's important. I see them, they're still coming in. I just want to keep looking at them. So they're great, welcoming all kinds of learners. Exactly, Leanne. We're going to talk a little bit about that too. Great, thank you so much. So let me go back to my screen here. All right, so our learning goals for today. These are the ones that I listed. We're going to improve our understandings of key principles of adult education that promote inclusion, communication, and learning. We're also going to introduce facilitation techniques and strategies that build community, communication, and learning. And also, we'll introduce other tools, attitudes, and processes that you can easily find on the internet that you can consider, because when we plan our community work, we want to use a whole bunch of resources. So those are our goals for today. And hopefully those will meet your learning goals as well. If you have any other questions about what we'll do or concerns, put them in the chat box and Mina will have a look at them. Okay. If just so that you know, I've also asked Mina to monitor the chat box. If I'm saying something that doesn't make sense or isn't clear, that needs immediate remedy, please put that in the chat box and Mina will get my attention and I will answer those questions immediately. If there's more of a bigger question, a reflection question that would have a longer answer that may take us a little bit away from the topic or in more depth than I could take at the immediate time, we'll have hopefully a time when we can have some Q&A at the end. So that's what we're budgeting for the program. Is that okay with folks? Do people feel okay with that? If there's any issues, you can put your concerns into the chat box. Group agreements. Now, when I talk about those times that groups have not worked, if programs haven't worked, often it's because I have forgotten to talk with the group about how we will work together and come to agreements on that right at the start. It's almost like setting up ground rules or group norms, group agreements, ground rules. Those are all the same kind of thing for what I'm talking about. So these are a priority for you to develop with your group at the beginning of every program. And when I do it, I'm an old school flip chart person. I will write them on the flip chart and keep them at the front of the group at every meeting. You don't need to develop them every time you meet if you're meeting again with the same group, but keep them at the front at all times because they're a reminder for everyone. And basically, group agreements document the ways that we all will behave so that every person is provided their best context for learning. So I might ask a group, so how do you need us to be in order for you to have the experience that you need to have in this group and feel comfortable participating? And people will come up with things like one person speaks at a time, or you know, I want people to raise their hand if they have something to say. Listen to what other people are saying. No, don't just talk. You know, don't be judgmental. Don't mock or attack other people. Accept people for who they are and how they are. For other people, be on time. You know, don't make us wait. Don't take breaks longer than we thought. And people will often generally say, well, I need respect. I want us to respect each other. And often I'll say, so what does respect look like for you? And people have an opportunity to talk more deeply about the types of groups that have been productive contexts for them or the type that haven't, so that the group can get a sense about how everybody needs each other to be, and to also take responsibility. So all groups contribute to developing this list and must agree to it. And the other thing is, it's up to the individual to take personal responsibility for them, not just the facilitator to enforce them. Why is this important to me? Because I've been in groups where everybody keeps looking to the facilitator to solve a problem within the group. And sometimes it's between group members. So when we're working with adults, it's important for us to emphasize the responsibility we each have for our own learning and for each other's learnings in our learning circles. It's not just up to the facilitator. It's good to give feedback. It's good to ask for help, but it's also important that we support people in taking responsibility for their own behavior as well. Because we're not able to develop those together ourselves, and perhaps you did this already at the beginning of your program, here is my proposed list of group agreements for your consideration. So I feel that we are too many for us to use the raise hand function. So if you need to speak, as we said before, please type into the chat box. I am not able to monitor the chat while I am speaking, but Mina will be monitoring the comments, and she has been invited to turn her microphone on and jump in and catch my attention. So I'm hoping she'll do that and use her judgment on that. If it's a question that can wait till the end, by all means, we'll have a time to address that at the end. You are going to be moving into small groups at some point today. And so within those groups, I would invite you to please listen respectfully to each other when you are in the group. Be mindful of the time constraint. I would say share the air. So don't speak too long without allowing others to also speak and participate. Take responsibility for staying on task. There is a particular goal for your group to accomplish in the appointed time. So each person needs to take responsibility to make sure you can get the work done within the time given. And if it's helpful, you could assign one group member who's going to be the scribe or note taker or the facilitator, if that is what your group needs in order to accomplish its goals. And what's interesting is I'm going to talk about the role of the facilitator in the coming minutes. So you can think about whether you want some person to take responsibility for some of those activities, if you want, in your small group. Is that agreeable to folks? If there's any issues or questions, you could put that into the chat, please. So I'm going to start out talking about adult learners. What do we need to know about how adults learn? Well, rather than working, and we've probably all worked with children, we know children, adults come already with a self-concept. Adults have expectations. We're autonomous, we're independent, we're self-directed. We are choosing what we want to study, what we want to talk about. We have an expectation that we will participate in all decisions that affect us. We don't want to be passive about our learning. Adults mostly learn from our experiences. So often when we are adults, we will seek experiences to enrich our lives and enrich what we know about life and about a variety of topics. So when we get together with adults, we need to assume that adults already have learned from previous experiences. We don't need to start at square one. In fact, where we are now is always the best starting place. We will find out where we are now by talking with the people we're working with ahead of time or early on in the learning experience to find out what they know already. There's nothing more boring than providing redundant information to people. So start out where they are. And then when you are designing your activities, make sure that they are experiential. That is going to be the best way for adults to learn. This is the great irony of my sitting here, blah, 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 blahing to you, talking to you about things when I know that this may not be your best learning style. You probably have a capacity for it for 15 or 20 minutes, and then you really will want to do something. So that's what I've designed for today, something that offers you an experience and an activity you can participate in. Adults also gravitate toward the things that matter. So when adults are ready to learn things, adults are highly motivated, especially when the things they want to learn are connected to needs and priorities. That's why I know that you are all passionate about food and food security, because you are here taking time out of your busy days to build skills so that you can do more in your communities around food. I know that you have a readiness to learn today. Adults also are more interested in things that have immediate application rather than an investment for the long-term future, especially when we're working in community work. I've been on short-term projects, long-term projects. If you are looking for a volunteer, don't say, I want you on my committee for the next 10 years. Say, I've got a project that needs to be done in the next 3 months. Do you have time? You're more likely to get people who have time for something short-term and focused than long-term. Also, many adults prefer work that is task-oriented, life-focused, and problem-solving, rather than something that's theoretical. So make it engaging and make it relevant to the adults you're working with. Again, no surprise, we adults are internally motivated. At some point in our life, we say, you know, there's nothing you could say or pay me to do certain things. We will do things because we want to do them. So working at that intersection where people are motivated is going to be that happy place and that productive place for you as a facilitator or leader. And adults basically need to know the value of what they're learning and the why behind their learning. So again, coming back to the idea of relevance and applicability, it's really, really important for you when you are choosing topics, choosing activities, choosing goals for your community food mentor programming in your community. This is one of my favorite pictures, the banking model of education. So the banking model is the traditional pedagogy model of education, where an expert takes information, opens your brain, and pours it in. And many of the ways that we learn when we're children is very much in the banking model, where we're just getting information, and keeping it in our heads. Adult education is not the banking model of education. So I'm going to just do a little banking model on the left, adult education on the right kind of comparison. So often in the banking model, and certainly in our elementary schools, the teacher chooses a topic or the curriculum is the topic that someone else has deemed important without really consulting others. That's the traditional model of banking model of education. For adult education, you want to work on a topic area that connects with your group's interests or needs. So it may be that you as a facilitator come in with an idea, you begin to work with the group, and the idea changes because the group has participated in forming that into something that is more related to their interests or needs. In the banking model, we aim for a solution or goal based on our own assumptions or biases or aspirations. And again, as I say, you can develop the goal or solution along with those you're working with in adult education. For the banking model, you'll get information, put it into a presentation, feed it to the group, and they're largely passive. They're putting all the information into their heads. In adult education, as I said, we start out with what the group knows already, and you build the work on that foundation, and you engage the group as the program develops and as it is presented. So it is not a passive process for adults in learning or program work. And finally, the idea of the banking model is that the teacher knows best. You're going to tell your group what they need to learn, and you're going to think that that's what they need. And sometimes, like my first experience, it didn't work. So when in adult education, we need to be flexible. We need to go with the flow. We will always be working with people's emerging needs. The idea of emerging needs is that I think I need something now, but once I have this experience, I have a new need that's emerging. When we work at that level of emerging needs, we are always moving forward at the front of the tide as it rolls in. That's where we want to be as facilitators and leaders. We will always be on track with people's needs. We will always have their interest. We will always have their energy and motivation if we stay at the forefront of the emerging needs of the group, rather than sitting back in the middle or waiting or being top down in how we lead our programs. So what does this all mean for us as facilitators, all this information I've thrown at you? So in our CFM work, we're going to find that our adult learners will attend our workshops only if the workshops and programs are relevant to our needs and obviously connected usefully to a problem or situation that our group wants to resolve. Our adult learners will expect to decide about and contribute to nearly every aspect of the program. They'll want to decide on what the topic is, what results we're looking for, where and how the work group works together, where we meet, what we have for snack, what we don't have for snack, all of those things, every bit will be important to adult learners because we all come with expectations and hopes for our learning, and we expect to be participating in that. And what happens, of course, which is what happens in my workshop, is that people will let their feet do the walking. If your workshop isn't engaging, if it's not interesting or relevant, people will not stick around and finish it. So that's also an important thing. Use all of your project planning skills with this adult learning in mind, and you will always have really exciting programs that people will come to. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about communication. And as I said, facilitating virtually is very different and much more difficult than facilitation in person, because we all know that communication is, at its best, the giving, receiving, or exchanging of information, opinions, or ideas so that the message is clearly understood by everyone involved. And I am not able to see each of you, to make eye contact, to get a sense of whether you're with me or not. And that is very hard for me as a facilitator. It's also hard for you as a participant because you are used to having that expectation too. But here we are. We'll go through some information, and you will have also a chance to have a small group experience that is much better in the way of communication. It will give you the opportunity for the two-way process that is most effective, so that the receiver of the information is enabled to provide a response or some sort of feedback so that we understand that we're connecting and understanding each other well. So when you're working with a group, it's different from when you are working with individuals. With a group, as was wisely noted in the chat around a best practice, we need to provide intentional spaces which are going to allow group members to provide their responses or feedback, as individuals or as a group. So there has to be space in your design and in your leadership for people to give those responses. So allowing time for people to process their thoughts between statements is important. Building into your agenda time and spaces for feedback is also really important. In your group agreements, it is possible to include elements that can contribute to good communication. For instance, you can include participatory processes like raise your hand to speak. You can include rules for good communication. For instance, use I statements, speak for yourself, don't generalize, those kinds of things. You can also create a very positive communication culture, having an agreement like there's no such thing as a silly question. How I like to word it is I say, if you have a question that you want to ask and you're shy about it, ask it anyway, because there's probably somebody else in the room who also has the same question and is shy and will be very grateful that you asked it. So that is a good communication culture for groups so that you can get people's honest and frank feedback and also answer questions and keep things relevant for everyone. We've all heard that it's good to be a good listener. It's really hard to be a good listener while you are facilitating. And it is impossible for me right now because I can't see everybody. But when we're in a group, it's really important to watch for body language, even if people don't put up their hand to speak or to comment. Sometimes we will see people fidgeting, they're distracted, or you'll find people whispering to each other on the sideline instead of talking to the group. And you might wonder, gosh, is there something they don't understand? Are they getting bored? Do they have a personal or a group need that could be addressed? It's important as a facilitator, when you notice that, to pause the process and check in with the group members. The mantra I have is pause, expose, repropose. That stands for, so pause. So just take a moment, just hang on, folks. I'm just going to take a moment. How are people doing? Are there things going on we should bring to the group? That's exposing it. Find out what's going on, what the issue is. Oh, we need to close the window because people are cold, or we need a break, whatever. Expose what the issue is, and then repropose how to move forward given that new information. Example, I notice you're fidgeting. Is there anything in the group? Yes, group members want to take a break. Okay. Would you be okay if we take 10 minutes now, and when we come back, we will adjust the agenda this way so that we can still continue our work? Does that work for folks? Okay. So that's the kind of thing you can do as a facilitator that shows flexibility. You're responding to the needs of the group, but you're also responding to the needs of the program. Sometimes people will make off-topic comments, and sometimes that person is me. I am such a diverger. I love going off topic, and I'm terrible to other facilitators, which is a very bad habit. But those comments are often important because they reflect what somebody's thinking about. Sometimes that's where the really creative things are happening for people when something comes up for them. If they come up in your group, it's important not to ignore them for two reasons. One is it could be that it really is a great idea, way off the radar of what you were thinking about, but wow. But also, it's important when we speak into the group that we are acknowledged, even if what we are saying isn't relevant or doesn't fit the agenda. So what I try to do is I have a parking lot. It's its own flip chart sheet of paper called parking lot. And if a topic comes up that we're not going to be addressing on the agenda today, we put things into the parking lot so they are not lost. If that was my idea in a group and it was written down at the front on a parking lot, I will know that I was heard and that that idea is not lost and won't be lost. We're going to try and get back to it later. So the parking lot is a really important place to have in all of your groups so that it is a collecting place for creative ideas, for gauging how the group is going or where they need to go next. It's very important not to just silence people if they seem to be going off topic. Really listen for why they're talking that way and keep track of really good ideas that need to be followed up on. You are going to be reviewing more communication skills when you go into your small groups, so not to worry. But I just want to talk about some facilitation skills that are related. So when you're facilitating, and we talk about facilitation skills, the facilitator is the one who guides the process. So facilitation skills are process skills that we're going to use to guide and direct the key parts of our organizing work with groups that we're working with. So whether it's a meeting or a training session, the facilitator is the one who shapes and guides the process so that everyone can work together and the group can meet their goals and accomplish what they've set out to do. So overall, the facilitator will make sure everyone feels comfortable participating and everyone feels good about their contributions. The facilitator will develop the structure and the culture that allows for everyone's ideas to be heard. The facilitator maintains the process so that the work continues to progress and that the goals are accomplished by the group. The facilitator makes sure that the group's ideas and decisions are theirs and not just an imposition of the facilitator. And just as a sidebar, one of the adult education tenets is that as an adult educator, if you ask a question that you already know the answer to, then it's not a very good question. We need to be comfortable asking questions that we don't know the answers to. So we share the curiosity about what that answer is, what others think or feel, and how that contributes to all of our understanding about what we're working on. As a facilitator, it's important to support everyone, be constructive, and non-judgmental as well as you can. I'm just going to stop here for a minute and just let you know, you're going to be going to a website, a Google slide page, and in your small group work, and all of my slides are going to be posted there. So you don't have to worry about taking notes. I'm giving a lot of information. You will have access to all of these slides. You can review them and make any notes you want later. So don't worry about it. I apologize if I'm going quickly. This is a framework that I learned when I was doing early on doing professional facilitation work. And it's a framework I call MIT. And M stands for maintaining the group. I stands for individual needs, and T stands for task needs. When we are facilitating, we are always paying attention to the MIT of the group, the maintenance of the group, the responsibility that I have to maintain the group, the responsibility I have to make sure people's individual needs are met as well as possible, and also in all of that, making sure that we're getting on with the task. We're getting through our agenda. We're hitting the marks we set. We're getting to our goals. And if you are able to do this well, all at the same time, you are truly a rock star, because it takes a lot of mental energy and attention to do that. But those are all the layers that you are working at when you are doing facilitating well in groups. When we talk about maintaining the group, what does that actually look like when you're facilitating? You can start with the physical setup. Think about the type of work that your group needs to get done. Maybe meeting in a big room with a circle is the best way. Maybe we all need to be sitting at small tables in small groups. Maybe we need to sit in an organized way, everybody facing the front for a presenter. There's very different, in numerous different ways to set up a room so that it's conducive. And maintaining the group can often depend on the physical setup of a room. Also, is the room comfortable? You're going to be there a long time. Are they comfortable chairs? Is the temperature right? Do we have access to washrooms? Those kinds of things. All of those things that groups need. I mentioned this before. Setting up group agreements is really important right at the start. So often I have forgotten to do that. And then when things start going off the rails, you don't have the foundation that everyone can work from, that you all agreed to at the beginning, that could reinforce how you get people back on track. So setting up group agreements is important for maintaining the group. Checking the agenda with people right at the start. We did that too in this program, including times for people to respond and give feedback. So that people always stay engaged and connected. That's important. Always watching for those signs of unrest, disengagement, or distraction. And also listening to and responding to feedback to improve the effectiveness of the group. Don't take it personally if you made a mistake or your guess of what the group needed wasn't correct. Just make the change. Your role is to serve the needs of the group when you're facilitating. I'm sure you've got other things that you could think of when you think about your experiences as a group member. How could a facilitator make this group work better? How, because we're trying to function, in a team environment. So think about those things. There's a term I call resistance. Have you ever been in a group where you've got either individuals or even the whole group begins to resist the process? Things start falling apart in an unexpected manner. If there are difficulties arising in the functioning of your group, chances are they stem from problems in one of the following 3 areas. So I'm giving this to you as a diagnostic. So you can keep this up your sleeve if you see things going wrong. In fact, you could apply this to many other aspects of your work life, anytime you're working with people. Goals. Perhaps the goals of the group are not clear. Maybe they haven't been agreed upon by the whole group. Maybe somebody is not really understanding them. Sometimes things fall apart because all of a sudden we realize I'm working toward this goal and somebody is working toward a different or competing goal. So clarifying goals can sometimes address resistance that group members may demonstrate. Roles. Everyone will have different responsibilities when we're working in groups. Task responsibilities or functions. Sometimes there is disagreement or lack of clarity regarding who does what, and this can cause group difficulties. Sometimes you can work on getting clarity on that with people, more clearly defining who is doing what, why, when, that kind of thing. So that can be important too. Maybe you've had an experience where you thought you were working on something and then someone else did and it wasn't clear, and then it all gets uncomfortable and you're not effective in your group. So check out and make sure people's roles are clear. And then the final one is relationships, and this might be the biggest one. Often people will get into conflict, especially when we're working on issues we're all passionate about, disagreements. And it could be the disagreement doesn't stem from the what we're doing or who's doing what. It could be that I'm having difficulty on an interpersonal level with group members. It is important, if you can, to identify and address sources of conflict as early as possible. Not many of us are really good at working through conflict. It may be that you need to get some help, but identifying that and developing a plan for dealing with that is really important if you can. And as I said, this is my high-level diagnostic. If you have a group that's not functioning, check. Are there problems with goals or misunderstandings with goals? Are there problems with roles around who's doing what, who's responsible for this, who's responsible for that? Or are there issues between people that need to be resolved? So this is just my higher level thing as a facilitator that you might want to use as a lens. So I talked about MIT, we've talked about M, maintenance. Now I'm talking about I, individual needs. What does meeting individual needs in a group look like when you're the facilitator? Again, I keep coming back to it, group agreements. We can set in our group agreements ways for us to meet people's individual needs. For instance, if I'm hard of hearing, I need to have other people feeling comfortable and safe, comfortable in speaking up when I'm around, for instance. I need to feel safe to ask others to speak up if I don't hear them. When it's in the group agreements, that gives me much more confidence in doing that. Another way we can meet individual needs is to really invite people's individual strengths or interests into the work or the outcomes of the group. Be open to the gifts that people bring and find ways to bring them in. Don't assume that everyone is on track with you, with what you're saying and what you're doing. And always stop if you can, inviting questions. You know, is this clear? Are we doing okay? What did I leave out? Give people an opportunity as an individual to respond and say, you know, I've got issues or not. We talked earlier about being flexible. That is so important. There will be emerging needs that people have, and we can also respond to unique differences. When we're of different ages, different abilities, when we have different learning styles, different literacy levels, different language skills, it's hard to do a one-size-fits-all program. So in order to ensure that everyone has a good experience, it's important to pay attention to people's individual needs as much as possible and meet them as much as possible. Of course, the first step is to be aware. So creating a context when people will feel safe to talk to you about individual needs, that's going to be very important right from the start. This does require paying a lot of attention when you are busy juggling everything else. So task needs, the MIT, maintenance, individual, task, MIT. So we're talking about task needs now. So meeting task needs looks like having and addressing clear goals and objectives, no question. And it may be when you're talking about program design, you'll talk about goals and objectives. Generally, goals are the broad statement of where we want to go, and objectives are the task steps beneath that are going to take you to the goal. So you want each of them clear. We all need to agree on the larger purpose, vision, or goal. We also need to agree on the objectives, the things that we're going to do to get there. So making sure you have clear processes so people will contribute to and agree to goals and objectives is important. A clear agenda. Leading inclusive processes to achieve your goals. The things we've talked about making sure people have ways to participate and engage and contribute are all really important to achieve your task needs. Not getting sidetracked by divergers. It doesn't mean you ignore them, but those diverging comments, keep track of them, but don't get sidetracked if they're taking you away from your goals and objectives. Remember the parking lot. And really important, keeping on time. It's very hard when you run out of time for things. So keep on time so that people can achieve their work. And I'm sure you're going to think of lots of other things too from your own experiences. around task needs and what that looks like. I want to talk quickly about situational leadership. How you are with a group changes as the group develops, okay? As situations change, as learnings happen, as progress is made. In the early times, you may be more of a director or a guide. When the group is inexperienced, when there's a lot of input needed, you might need to do a lot to get people motivated. You might be really hands-on when you're providing facilitation leadership. As the group gets going, you may become more of a coach or maybe an explainer rather than the hands-on guide. You know, your group wants your contributions, but they're getting motivated. You know, they need some input, some because they're inexperienced, but they're really taking more responsibility and getting things going. The next type is supporting or facilitating, which is much more hands-off. The group is skilled. You'll need to provide some structure. You may need to encourage confidence. You may find that you're asking open-ended questions so that they start coming up with more of their answers. They reveal the things they already know. Their skills are invited in. You are facilitating their bringing all of that together in the group. And then the highest level for group functioning is when you can just delegate and empower. The group's rolling along. You might just be a cheerleader from a distance. You know, you may have to wait to be asked for assistance. Maybe it turns out you're just setting up the room and they go at it. You don't have to do much, but that changes. And, you know, sometimes though, something might come up in the group. You might have to go back then to be the coach or the explainer. You may have to go back and give input with information or resources. It's not a linear process. Community work, adult learning is actually a spiral. So we're always returning back to the situation in almost the same place as before, but not quite. We've achieved some progress, but learning is a spiral. It's not a linear process. And your role will change depending on where your group is in the spiral. Somebody mentioned in the chat box about making sure we support different learning styles. And so I would suggest that you do your own research on the Universal Design for Learning guidelines. This is something that educators are trying to work more and more with, and it has to do with meeting different learning styles and different learning needs related to inclusion and accessibility. So when you have a well-designed activity with a Universal Design for Learning guidelines, they're motivating because they are answering the question why for the learner so that the learning activity is relevant to them. It connects with the why for them. It also mobilizes the what. It mobilizes the knowledge and resources of the learner when you are working with them. It also provides a variety of how ways. So visual learners, maybe there's more how that is visually oriented. Maybe for people who are auditory learners, there's more verbal presentations, or verbal ways to participate. So we're looking at the why, the what, and the how when we're designing our activities. And when we can offer a diversity of ways for people to enter in, we can work better with diverse people working together. And that is a growing edge for many educators. And I'm not going to go into it in any more detail than this right now, but I would encourage you to do some research on this on your own and think about how those guidelines can influence how you do your leadership.